Hello, fellow thrill-seekers. As the night sky prepares to light up with blazing colors of celebration, we're here to turn your joyous cheers into blood-curdling screams. Tonight, we plunge into the shadows of America's favorite summer holiday, the 4th of July. Prepare yourself for a night of barbecue grills gone wrong, fireworks with a mind of their own, and Independence Day parties where the only thing you'll be liberating are your deepest fears. So sit back, clutch your blankets tightly, and remember, don't let the fireworks drown out your screams. Let the terrifying tales begin. Ever since I was a kid, I've loved the 4th of July. The barbecues, the parades, and the fireworks lighting up the night sky. Now, as a grown man living in New York City, the thrill had only multiplied. However, the 4th of July of 2023 was a day that would forever leave a scar on my heart and mind. The day started like any other Independence Day. The city was buzzing with anticipation. Families were out in the streets. The smell of hot dogs and hamburgers filled the air, and the stars and stripes hung proudly from every balcony. I too was caught in the festive spirit, decked out in my red, white, and blue attire, ready to celebrate with friends at a rooftop party in downtown Manhattan. As the sun began to set, the city was bathed in a warm orange glow. The excitement was palpable as the countdown to the fireworks display began. I remember my heart pounding in my chest, not from excitement, but from a sense of unease that had started to creep in. It was an inexplicable feeling, like the calm before a storm. Suddenly I felt my phone vibrate, an emergency alert. My heart sank as I read the words, "Possible bomb threat, seek immediate shelter." I showed my friends the alert, their faces turning as pale as mine. We were on the 40th floor of a high-rise, far from any immediate shelter. Panic set in. We decided to evacuate the building, but the elevators were full, and the stairwells were flooded with people trying to escape. It was chaos. People were screaming, children crying, and the deafening sound of sirens echoed from the street below. My fear turned into a nauseating reality when the building shook violently. A deafening roar filled the air, followed by an intense heat. It was as if time stood still. I don't remember much after that. I remember the sound of shattering glass, the screams of people around me, and the feeling of the floor giving away beneath my feet. Then, everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, my body aching in places I didn't know could hurt. I was informed by a solemn-faced nurse that I had been in a coma for 2 days. The bomb had detonated 2 blocks away from where we were. "I was one of the lucky ones," she said. "I had survived." The following days were a blur of pain, shock, and grief. The city that never sleeps was plunged into mourning. The skyline that was once lit up with fireworks was now dark, save for the occasional flicker of emergency lights. The streets that were filled with laughter and joy were now home to candlelight vigils and tear-streaked faces. I visited the site a week later. The once bustling street was now a hollow crater, a grim reminder of the horror that unfolded. I stood there staring at the wreckage, the smell of burnt metal and rubble still lingering in the air. This was supposed to be a day of celebration, of freedom, but all I could feel was the weight of loss and the deafening silence of a city in mourning. This 4th of July was a day like no other. A day when the fireworks were replaced by bomb blasts, joy replaced by fear, and freedom replaced by a chilling reminder of our vulnerability. This was not just a horror story, it was a wake-up call. A reminder that even in times of celebration, we must always remain vigilant, because danger often lurks where we least expect it. The 4th of July, a day typically associated with fireworks, barbecues, and the sweet taste of freedom. A day that for me used to be filled with fond memories of family laughter, the delicious scent of grilled burgers, and the comforting unity of our shared American pride. I'd always loved this holiday, eagerly looking forward to our annual family barbecue and the jovial atmosphere it brought along with it. But little did I know that this year, what should have been a day of celebration, would morph into the most frightening nightmare I'd ever experienced. The day started out like any other 4th of July. The weather was perfect. The sun was shining warmly down on us, casting a comforting glow over our suburban backyard. The grill was ablaze, the enticing aroma of barbecued meat wafting through the air, tantalizing our taste buds. The laughter and chatter of my family members echoed cheerfully around the yard, creating a beautiful symphony of happiness. The kids were frolicking around with sparklers, their faces illuminated with pure, innocent joy. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, we all gathered around our fire pit. The crackle of the fire, accompanied by the soft murmur of shared stories and the occasional laughter, created a truly idyllic scene. I remember looking up at the inky sky, the first fireworks splitting the darkness into a stunning display of color. It was a breathtaking sight, but it was also the moment my nightmare began. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a dark figure lurking in the shadows, its silhouette distorted by the sporadic fireworks. I brushed it off as a trick of the light or my imagination playing games, fueled by the ghost stories we'd been sharing around the fire. But as another firework exploded, painting the figure in a momentary eerie glow, I saw it move. It was inching closer to our family gathering, and my heart pounded in my chest, a sense of dread washing over me. Trying to shake off the unsettling feeling, I decided to investigate. I left the comforting warmth of the fire pit, venturing into the darkness towards the figure. The closer I got, the more details I could make out. It was a man, dressed in ragged, tattered clothes, his face hidden by a hood. My stomach knotted with fear when I saw him raise a hand, a knife glinting ominously in the light of the fireworks. Panic seized me. I tried to scream and run, but my legs refused to obey, frozen in terror. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way and I tumbled into a hidden pit, the breath knocked out of me. Looking up, I saw the man standing at the edge, peering down at me. My screams for help were swallowed by the booming sound of fireworks, creating a terrifying soundtrack to my unfolding nightmare. Frantically, I searched for a way out, but the walls of the pit were steep and slippery, offering no purchase. I was trapped like a rabbit in a snare. As the man began to descend into the pit, a new wave of panic hit me. I had to get out. My hand closed around a sharp rock in the dirt. As the man drew near, I flung it at him. It struck him square in the face, eliciting a pained howl. Seizing the moment, I clawed my way up the walls of the pit, dirt caking under my nails. I managed to haul myself out just as the man recovered and lunged at me. Stumbling back, my heart hammered in my chest, threatening to burst. I screamed again, praying someone would hear me over the relentless fireworks. To my relief, my brother emerged from the darkness, wielding a baseball bat like a knight with his sword. With a swift swing, he knocked the man back into the pit. Exhausted and shaken, I collapsed into my brother's arms, tears streaming down my face. The police arrived shortly after, pulling the man from the pit and handcuffing him. I learned he was a wanted fugitive who had been hiding in the woods near our house. That 4th of July forever tainted my perception of the holiday. The fireworks, once a sign of joy and freedom, became a grim reminder of the terror I'd experienced. The holiday, once filled with happiness and unity, became a symbol of a nightmarish encounter that still haunts my dreams to this day. I have always loved the 4th of July. It's a day of barbecues, beer, and big, beautiful fireworks. It's a day the whole neighborhood comes together to celebrate, and I've always loved the sense of unity it brings. But the 4th of July I experienced 3 years ago was different. It was a day of horror, a day that still haunts me. It was the hottest day of the year, and the whole neighborhood was buzzing with anticipation. Kids were running through sprinklers. The smell of barbecued meat was wafting through the air, and the adults were setting up lawn chairs in anticipation of the fireworks show. As the sun began to set, I started to prepare my own set of fireworks I'd bought from the town's annual fireworks sale. I had always enjoyed setting them off myself, the thrill of lighting the fuse, the anticipation of the explosion, the look of awe on everyone's faces. It was a tradition, a part of the celebration I looked forward to every year. After setting up my display, I joined the neighborhood gathering at the park where the main show was taking place. As I mingled with my neighbors, I couldn't shake off an eerie feeling. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The laughter didn't seem as hearty, the smiles not as genuine. It was as if a shadow had been cast over the festivities. The fireworks began and the sky was lit up with brilliant colors, but my unease remained. As the grand finale of the neighborhood show approached, I excused myself from the crowd to set off my own fireworks. I walked back to my house, the feeling of unease growing stronger with each step. The usually comforting familiarity of my neighborhood seemed foreign and intimidating. The streetlights cast long, menacing shadows, and an unsettling silence hung in the air. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached my front yard. I fumbled with my lighter, my hands unsteady. The first firework went off without a hitch, a beautiful array of colors lighting up the sky. But as I lit the second, a chilling scream pierced the night. It was a sound so horrifying, so full of pain and terror that it made my blood run cold. It was coming from the direction of the park. I dropped everything and ran towards the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. As I neared the park, the full horror of the scene unfolded. The grand finale had gone horribly wrong. A fire had broken out, and people were running in every direction, their screams echoing through the night. The fire department arrived quickly and began battling the blaze. I stood there paralyzed, watching as the scene unfolded. The fire was eventually extinguished, but the damage had been done. Several people were injured, and the park was a charred mess. The image of the carnage is seared into my mind. The horror of that night still haunts me. The 4th of July is no longer a day of celebration for me, but a reminder of the tragedy. I can still hear the screams, still see the fire. I haven't lit a firework since that night. The thrill I once felt has been replaced by a deep sense of dread. I just wish I could go back to the days when the 4th of July was just about barbecues, beer, and big, beautiful fireworks. But I know that will never be possible. The horror of that night has forever tainted the holiday for me. And as I sit here on another 4th of July, I can't help but feel a sense of dread as the sun begins to set and the first fireworks light up the sky. I'll never forget the 4th of July of 2018. What started as a typical Independence Day celebration, complete with fireworks and barbecues, took a nightmarish turn. It was a sultry afternoon as I finished setting up the barbecue grill in our backyard. Our neighborhood was buzzing with excitement. Kids were running around waving their little American flags, and homes were adorned with patriotic decorations. The tantalizing aroma of grilled burgers and hot dogs filled the air, and the festive music from a nearby party provided the perfect soundtrack for the day. As dusk settled, the highlight of the evening began: the fireworks display. Every year, Mr. Jenkins, the unofficial patriarch of our neighborhood, would put on a spectacular show that had kids and adults alike oohing and awing in delight. I sat on our porch, cold beer in hand, watching the night sky light up in a burst of colors. Suddenly, a particularly loud explosion echoed through the air, followed by a high-pitched whistling sound. I felt a rush of adrenaline as the crowd gasped in awe. But then, the awe turned into screams of panic. I watched in horror as a rogue firework shot down towards the crowd and exploded. Chaos ensued. Parents were scrambling to find their children. People were running in all directions, tripping over each other in the frenzy. Before I could even process what was happening, I heard my wife's terrified voice. "Isabella! Isabella!" She was desperately searching for our 7-year-old daughter, who just minutes ago was gleefully waving her sparklers, her face lit up with joy. My heart pounded in my chest as I sprinted towards the chaos, yelling for my little girl. After what felt like an eternity, I found Isabella huddled under a picnic table, her face streaked with tears. Relief washed over me as I scooped her up in my arms, whispering assurances that she was safe now. Just when I thought the nightmare was over, I heard a gut-wrenching scream that sent chills down my spine. I turned around and saw Mrs. Jenkins kneeling on the ground, cradling her husband's lifeless body. The rogue firework had hit him directly in the chest. The sight was so gruesome that I had to shield Isabella's eyes. The rest of the night was a blur. The sirens of police cars and ambulances filled the air, their red and blue lights flashing, casting a surreal glow on the horrific scene. I remember the feeling of Isabella's tiny body shaking in my arms, her sobs muffled against my chest. My wife was in a state of shock, her face pale as she clung to my arm. The following days were a somber affair. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, the once festive decorations now a grim reminder of the tragedy. The site of the Jenkins house, usually a hub of activity, now stood silent and desolate, a chilling testament to the horror that unfolded on the 4th of July. Even now, 3 years later, the memory haunts me. The festive music, the excited chatter of the crowd, the smell of barbecue, the brilliant fireworks, all these things that once symbolized joy and celebration, now only serve as reminders of that dreadful night. Every 4th of July, as the neighborhood gears up for the celebrations, I can't help but feel a sense of dread. The laughter and cheer seem forced, the colors less vibrant, It's a ghost of the celebration it used to be, and I can't help but wonder if it will ever regain its former glory. But the scariest part isn't the memory of that night. It's the knowledge that in a split second, a day of joy and celebration can turn into a nightmare. That's a horror that truly lingers. It was the 4th of July, the day when the capital city of the United States, Washington, D.C., was at its liveliest. The aroma of barbecues filled the air, children darted around with sparklers, and the city was decked out in red, white, and blue. As a journalist, I had been assigned to cover the grand celebrations in the city. I remember that day well, not because of the festivities, but because of the horror that unfolded. The celebrations were set to culminate in a grand display of fireworks at the National Mall. I was amongst the sea of people, all gathered to witness the spectacle. While waiting for the show to begin, I decided to wander around, capturing the sights and sounds of the jubilant crowd. As I made my way past the Washington Monument, I noticed a man. He was standing alone, unlike the rest of the crowd, who were busy reveling in the festivities. He wore a dark trench coat, despite the summer heat, and his gaunt face wore a grim expression. Something about him seemed off, so I approached him, thinking it could make for an interesting story. As I neared him, I could see his eyes, hollow, devoid of any emotion. My journalist instincts kicked in, and I introduced myself. His response was a cold, unsettling stare. He muttered something under his breath that I couldn't make out. I tried to engage him in conversation, but he remained tight-lipped. Suddenly, he reached into his coat and pulled out an old, tattered book. He held it out to me and said, "The truth lies within." Before I could react, he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Confused, I looked at the book. Its brown leather cover was worn and faded. I opened it to find strange symbols and drawings. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. As I flipped through the pages, I felt a chill run down my spine. The symbols began to glow, emitting a faint, eerie light. The crowd around me seemed to fade away, and I was engulfed in a strange, uncomfortable silence. Suddenly, I felt a strong force pulling me into the book. Before I could grasp what was happening, I was inside the book, and the world around me had changed. The vibrant city had transformed into a dark and eerie place. The buildings were crumbling, the streets were deserted, and there was an unsettling stillness. The once jubilant crowd was nowhere to be seen, replaced by ominous shadows that loomed in the distance. I and my camera were the only reminders of the reality I had come from. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in the silence. The air was thick with fear, and I could almost taste it. I started walking, trying to find my way back. All the while, the ominous shadows seemed to be closing in on me. Suddenly, I saw the man from before. He stood at a distance, his hollow eyes now glowing eerily. He pointed towards the Washington Monument, which now looked like a grotesque version of its former self. As I moved closer, I caught sight of a symbol on the monument, the same as in the book. I reached out to touch it, and the world around me started spinning. The next thing I knew, I was back amongst the crowd, the grand fireworks illuminating the night sky. I looked around, disoriented, my heart still pounding. The book was still in my hand, now just an ordinary tattered book. I looked around for the man, but he was nowhere to be seen. That 4th of July was a celebration I'll never forget. Not for the grandeur, but for the horror that I experienced. The sights and sounds of the festivities will forever be tainted by the memory of the eerie silence and the ominous shadows. The horror of that night lingers, a chilling reminder of a reality that I hope never to revisit. And there you have it, my dear thrill seekers. We've journeyed through the eerie and the uncanny, the chilling tales that lurk in the shadows of America's birthday. As the fireworks light up the skies this 4th of July, remember, not all is as it seems. Be safe, stay alert, and most importantly, keep the spirit of curiosity alive. If you enjoyed these horrifying tales, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and ring that notification bell so you can be the first to know when we dive into more dark corners of history's most festive days. Good night and stay spooky, everyone.